Welcome to another episode of Tech Tuesday. And by the way, happy Thanksgiving for those of you who are in the U.S. And for the rest of you who are outside the U.S., you're going, Thanksgiving what? Or my Thanksgiving is a different time of the year because I know Thanksgiving happens in other places. My guest today is David Leuci.
Yes.
With Restaura. And before we get into our conversation, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Well, David, welcome to Tech Tuesday. I'm really excited about this conversation. We haven't actually met, of course, in face. I was supposed to be at Leading Age. You did a ton of, as I understand it, a ton of great demonstrations and conversations there. And my watchers know I ended up not being able to go because I had COVID, which was very unfortunate. But let's actually start by talking a little bit about who you are and who Restaura is.
Yeah, absolutely. And happy Thanksgiving, Steve. Thanks for having me on today. I guess for everybody, my name is David Leuci. I work for Restaura. I'm the Chief Information Officer here. And Steve, I've been in technology for a little over 27 years, 12 of those in the food and dining contract management space. And, specifically in senior living as well. So I'm excited to really share my perspective on being at the intersection of technology, AI, and senior living. And I think, senior living, a lot of people talk about the food and dining space. And really, I think it's kind of been stuck in a little bit of a cycle of complacency for far too long. And here at Restaura, we're here to really break that cycle and redefine what that means to thrive in the later stages of life.
So I want to dig into this sort of technology and dining services. I think most people, if I said, let's talk about technology and dining services, I'd hear POS. Yep. And maybe menu planning on a very sort of almost like a spreadsheet Word document basis, and maybe digital signage. But there's really a lot more to it than that, right?
Yeah, exactly, Steve. I mean, I consider that kind of table stakes, right? That's all, what you need to kind of operate the business back of the house, right? Stuff. But really, we're focused on, what the client experience looks like, what the resident experience looks like, and what our team member experience looks like, but not through those lenses of that back of the house. That's just, again, table stakes. We know what it does. Of course, you have to have it. But really, we're focused on, that next step, the AI piece and the advanced technology now that we can put in place that really people, are using today, Steve. And I always say, people talk about AI and, it's new, it's net new. And I said, no, it's not really net new, right? It's been a while, or been around for a while, right, Steve? I mean, AI is used in your daily life through features on your smartphone, like facial recognition, voice assistants like Siri and Google, personalized recommendations on streaming services, Netflix, right? So you use your remote now. You can't even buy a TV now without being a smart TV, right? So AI has been around for quite some time. You use it in your car with traffic updates. So it's been around for quite some time. We're just, using that in a different capacity. So, your traditional back of the house, or even sometimes your front of the house, like you mentioned, point of sale, you have to have it, but what are the new features? Where can we take it to that next level of these services to really enhance the client and the residents' lives?
So I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper, but I actually want to back up a little bit about the front of the house thing. So I was talking to somebody yesterday, a longtime friend in the senior living industry, and he was describing for me a conversation he was having with a senior living operator who believes that someday all the resident care stuff, the bathing and dressing and all that stuff will be done by robots. And so I guess my question would be, there's been, I think, robots we've seen in the dining services sort of transporting dirty dishes and sometimes food back and forth to servers. So are we looking at a day when we don't actually have servers anymore and we just have robots?
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve, and one that we're approached with a lot, right? And so, well, I think the adoption of robotics are gaining in popularity. Here at Restaura, our approach is really personal and intimate connection with our clients and residents. And for us, robotics are used mainly in the back of the house, right? So we don't want robotics kind of on the, in the dining room, kind of waving around and in with your residents, right? We want a personal connection. And we prefer the traditional approach in the front of the house, actively engaged in the resident's life. All of our servers are equipped with tablets and iPads that contain and capture all kinds of relevant information about that resident. So, and we collect this data really to have meaningful conversations and create that personalized offering with our residents. Not to say that robotics aren't used again in the back of the house. It's just our approach is different because it is such a personal connection to that resident.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing. I'm going to sort of take a little side journey here for a minute. My stepfather is living in assisted living, and I've had a couple of conversations with people who have created appliances, maybe I would call them, that where the idea is that AI would have conversation with older people. And in fact, I've signed him up for a trial, and I'm not sure why it's not working. So I just got out the voice app with ChatGPT on my phone yesterday when I was seeing him, and he had a pretty good conversation. It was pretty interesting. So maybe it'll be dinner companions too. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's certainly an option, right, Steve? And we just want to make sure that experience, right, not just the dining experience, their overall experience is exceptional, right? Yep. And I think the perception of a robot could be a little be taken back at sometimes by a resident rather than an actual human speaking to them and really engaged in again. Steve, we're collecting data and talking about residents about, their pets, not their likes and their dislikes and their preferences around food, but, do they have any pets? What's their pet's birthday? What's their pet's name, right? So we're really intimate with that resident so we can create events around those data points.
So at Leading Age, you were demoing a bunch of technology dashboards that were really super customized for different audiences. I think one of the questions that people always really struggle with is that just because you have all this technology, do you get to the point where it becomes so complex that it actually, it's too hard to learn, too hard to use, it's too difficult to put in your workflow? Can you talk to me a little bit about the let's actually start with these dashboards and the thinking behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve, you're right. We built a complex but simple platform relative to a lot of the gaps that we have seen in the senior living space. And what that means is we really took a very hard look, contracted with leading experts in the space, Steve. We hired behavioral scientists, conducted thousands of hours of research to really validate some of these assumptions of these gaps. And from here, really built a purpose-built infrastructure to support the innovative approach that we have taken. Access and transparency to real-time, insightful data, leveraging predictive analytics, machine learning, chatbots are just a few of these tools, Steve. So, some of the dashboards that we showcased from a client perspective, we've built, again, very purpose-built insights into items like your food and labor cost, your inventory, your cost control, where we're leveraging both AI and predictive analytics to project future costs and savings. So not only, Steve, are we being very transparent in real time with our data that the client has access to at any time on whatever the device. But we're showing and showcasing that, again, I'll pick on food and labor because that's always one that, you set a budget, you have a food and labor, and those costs variably, change, right? So we don't want them to go up. But as we can see, if they are going up due to whatever the reason may be, we want to be able to control those, show those, and give alternatives. We're also predicting out months ahead of time what that looks like because we have all this data coming in from our supply chain. So we can see if items are increasing in cost. So we can make then, based on our services and our AI, we can make recommendations to lower the cost if the cost is rising. So pretty amazing, built on the data and amazing insights. The dashboards are nothing but the insights that and from the data, right? But again, our purpose is to be as transparent as possible. And again, Steve, most of the time, in the past, you're waiting for a QBR to surface this data, and we don't want that, right? We want to be upfront and very transparent. I think from a resident perspective, we've built a resident portal for family members and caregivers. You spoke about your father-in-law. Giving them full access to the resident profile, showcasing what they ate, when they ate it, upcoming culinary events, and so much more. We have also built personalized therapeutic diet app, allowing the resident to really understand their menu options based on their diet preferences, their likes, their dislikes. And this is all built, in a private cloud. And Steve, we also built this amazing, Restaura GPT app for the residents to use to ask questions relative to, the menu or the menu offerings or the venue. And I think lastly, if I could just, from a team member perspective, we also built operational dashboards and interactive apps, allowing team members to know the resident on a much more personal level to better serve and communicate with.
Well, and one of the things I find interesting, and I don't know, you obviously you know the dining services much better than I, but it occurs to me that one of the things that makes providing care experiences for residents is that sometimes people talk about their preferences, but they actually don't. They say they want one thing, but then they don't actually. When it comes right down to it, they don't actually get it right. So I'll give one example, and this is sort of hypothetical. That I might walk in and say, well, what I want is I want to have this really good healthy option every day. I want to have broccoli one day and Brussels sprouts and cauliflower and carrots. But in reality, when I sit down and I'm getting ready to order my lunch or dinner, I'm looking at, oh man, I'd really rather have potato chips. And so how do you use technology to sort of, or can you use technology to sort of figure this all out?
Right. Yeah. So like I just mentioned, we built, our Restaura GPT really helps out with that, Steve. And really what it is it's tied directly to that resident and that resident profile. So we know everything about that resident, right? Including preferences, allergens, likes, dislikes, and so forth. So, you kind of have their medical piece. But then you have exactly what you said. Hey, I like this, but I want this. So this really personalized therapeutic diet and GPT model allows the resident to say, hey, I want, I don't want to eat healthy today, but I am on a hot, healthy diet, right? So I want this, and I want the potato chips, and I want this. Well, it's going to come back and say, we don't recommend you having this because of this diet. So here are the alternatives that you can have instead of the potato chips. So what it's doing is really looking deep within that data set and surfacing alternatives that are healthy alternatives to what they really want or what they actually could have.
Or could have, yeah. And I think that, of course, that part of it, then your job is to be able to create these healthy options in a way that are appealing, right?
Right,
And
exactly.
so when you look at, can you, yeah, I want to pop that up. So this is diets and dietary preferences are not linear. And I think it's such a huge, huge issue that we don't talk about very much. So as I think what I'm hearing you're saying is what your goal is to use AI to create a better resident experience. And I'd like to actually just maybe paint for me a picture of what this dream Restaura resident experience looks like. If I'm a resident and I'm in your participating in your dining options, your dining services, tell me about why I'm going to fall in love with it.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna fall in love for several reasons. One, our food is outstanding, right? We're a food service contract company, so our food is outstanding. We hire nothing but the best chefs for your culinary, your cuisine, right? So that's number one. I think number two, leveraging our technology. What you're gonna find is the app that I just spoke of, and just the experience in general. Again, our servers are so knowledgeable, right? They go through extensive training with us. They know exactly, because it's all tied in, they know exactly what you like, don't like. But like you mentioned, likes and dislikes change, right?
Yeah,
So in real time, they're capturing that because they're having that conversation with you and they're noting that. So they're, typing in and noting on the tablet as fast as that resident is speaking of the likes and dislikes. So we have that flexibility to do that. The app that they have and that they're able to download gives them access to so much information of what they can and can't have depending on their diet, but also the venues coming up and the choices that they'll have. Right? It's not just you can only pick from one or two or three. No, for here at Restore, it's one or six or 10, right? That you have choices to select from. And we're helping the resident through AI make those choices, right? Or suggestions of those choices.
right, right. So I'm going to actually shift gears just a little bit here, David. I think that this whole idea of resident satisfaction gets talked about a lot. And I think the question really is are we accurately capturing it? And you talk about sort of two what feel like really subtle differences, which are the difference between sentiment and satisfaction.
Yeah.
And that's, they're all, the words almost sort of sound the same, but they're really quite different. Can you just sort of talk about the difference and what you're measuring and how you're measuring and why it's important?
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve, and we get asked this a lot. As a matter of fact, at Leading Age, it came up quite a bit, right? And so here at Restore, we really measure sentiment, not satisfaction. And really, what do I mean by that? Satisfaction is traditionally a quantitative measure on how satisfied a customer is with existing product or like a defined service, right? It's largely dependent on what people say. And we speak to a lot of people, right, Steve? And satisfaction surveys are done, once every 6 months, maybe even once a year. I was speaking with a few CEOs at the conference, and I asked them, when was your last survey conducted? I think one of them said, I don't even know, maybe a year ago, right? So how are you really gauging things? When we talk about sentiment, it's a broader, deeper, and more qualitative and generative understanding of behaviors, emotions, preferences, likes, dislikes, expectations, aspirations, and really your overall experience and their attitudes towards, the brand associated with delivering that experience. So it's more depending on dependent upon what people do, as opposed to what people say. So, and because Restore leverages sentiment scoring rather than a far easier satisfaction appraisal, right? Because satisfaction surveys are simple, right? We don't take the simple road. So we use our technology to really analyze that data for relevance and trends and actionability. Some of the technology is about the way we gather the data, Steve. You can say you gather it audio, video, conversations, scorecards, surveys, right? Some of it is how we actually analyze the data, and some of it's how we activate and, more importantly, Steve, respond to the data, right? And I think that's really a critical piece. Is really focused on the action that we take. So, for example, because we're collecting all the sentiment data in real time, we know exactly when an issue or an opportunity presents itself. If a resident dislikes something, right, the data is immediately captured, and through our technology, notifies the dining service director or the chef, whoever may be there, and action is taken immediately. So not only is it action, but we catalog that action, creating more of a knowledge base for future recommendations of incidents like this in the future, or for our AI to really hone in on that. So it's really less about surveys. Surveys is one part of it, but really this notion of sentiment. And Steve, we have 7, 8 different collection mechanisms for sentiment that we're using on a daily basis.
I just think this is so important. You kind of got my head spinning here, David. I'm thinking about it, right? So I go to a lot of conferences, which means I spend a lot of time in Uber and Lyft cars, right? And of course, every time is actually typically even before the ride is over, right after it's over, I get this pop up that says rate your driver, right? And almost the time I give them a 5. And yet, really, I would say maybe 1 out of 20 is really a 5, and a 4 should be a right. But everybody, you don't want to be rated down by your driver, and you don't want them to be in trouble. And so you give them this 5 rating. And I think that what you're talking about is if you just surveyed people, probably in general, people are going to tend to rate higher than maybe they really feel. But I would imagine just being able to look, if somebody cleaned their plate and asked for seconds, that's a pretty good indication that you did it right. Or on the flip side, they ordered something, and when you clean up the table and most of their food's still on their plate, probably pretty indication there's something wrong, or maybe just how long they linger at the table, right? So all those things are just fascinating, what you could do with all of that.
Right. And, Steve, again, we want this intimate conversation with our residents, right? So we don't want them to suffer in silence. We want them to really tell us, hey, this wasn't good, this was cold, whatever it may be. Or even, Steve, we're capturing environmental factors like the ambiance. Even though it's not in our direct control, we want to capture that because, again, it's about the overall experience that the resident has, right? And so while we may not have direct control over that the chair isn't comfortable, we're going to bring that to the client and note that to say, hey, here's the data we're collecting, and 92% of the residents don't like the chairs they sit in, right? So again, it's about the overall experience, not just solely focused on what we have directly in our control.
Oh man, I love this. This is so cool. This is where the AI really starts to shine, because it gives you the ability to take all this data that you've got and figure out what it really means to provide better services, more efficient services, reduce costs. So it sounds like most of this technology that you're talking about so far is sort of flow based rather than resident based. Are residents using technology as part of this? And are you finding that the residents are, I don't know, phobic about the technology?
No, you know what? It's a really interesting question. No, we're finding a lot of residents are super engaged, very engaged with what we're doing. And Steve, we partnered and conducted a survey, really looking at and understanding what this market looks like. And I think there's a misconception of residents or active adults being kind of phobic to technology, right? And we conducted a survey of about 1,500 active adults, and ranging from 55 to 96 years old, with an average of 68. And there were really key notable findings there, right? Food and nutrition is number one factor, right? That older adults believe affects their overall health and well-being. So that's great. More than a third consider themselves to be food explorers who are adventurous and like exploring new tastes and flavors. That's great for us, right? Because we're all about new cuisines and culinary and flavors, right? But I think the other thing above everything else, the older active adults want variety in their dining experiences, right? So part of our solution is to offer that. We offer many different venues, and then we offer many different alternatives, right? They may not feel like having the pasta tonight, right? They want something different. So the AI shining there is going to based on what they have had, what they like. It's going to surface additional options for them, right? Which is amazing. So that's really prevalent in what we're finding today. Now, the interesting part here, the technology part, that the perception of technology finds that in this study, 56% use technology in their daily lives, Steve. So in this age group, 56% use technology in their daily lives, and 6 out of 10 use tech and enjoy tech every day, right? So those are pretty good stats, right? And an interesting story. I was just speaking to my father last night, who happens to be 86 years old. And he was super excited to be going out to dinner with my sister-in-law and nieces and nephews. And they were going to a local restaurant here in the Boston area called Burton's. And, this is the exciting part, right? I talked to him last night and he had a great time. And he said, the best part was I love going to Burton's because I have the app downloaded on my phone and I rack up more points. So at 86, he's leveraging the technology at an active adult to get the points for Burton's.
Yeah. I love that story. I was at a age tech conference a number of years ago in San Francisco, and they had a panel of elders who talked about the technology they were using. And at that time, I think the youngest was high 60s and the oldest was in the 90s. And this was at a time when there were a whole bunch of tablets that companies had developed that were effectively dumbed down for older people. And what was fascinating to me was that as they talked to the panelists, every single one of them was just using the same technology that the rest of us were using. And I think that probably the biggest hindrance for older people a lot of times is the perception that they can't use it when in fact they are using it. So I really like that a lot. So do you see technology? I mean, I think one of the big things that everybody's afraid of is that technology gets in the way of human interaction. We don't talk about it so much with older people, but we talk about it a lot with kids, how they'll all sit down and sit around a room on their smartphones and interact with their devices. But do you see technology for older people actually enhancing conversations and relationships, and how does that work?
Yeah, I do, Steve, and it's a great question. As a matter of fact, I was saying the other day, there's very few people like you and I might be part of a group of people that used to use keys to start cars, right? That doesn't exist anymore. So I think technology has become such a powerful tool in enabling really independence for seniors and fostering those social connections. And here at Restaura, we're enabling that independence by providing really diverse menu options that align with their profile, not offering one, but 6, 7, 8 different options to meet the needs of their palate or their cuisine. And we're leveraging, smart home technology, video calling, online communities, and social platforms to help that engagement, right? We want them to still feel independent. I think most people, that are making a decision to go into assisted living or independent living feel like they're losing their independence, and we don't want them to feel like they're losing their independence, right? So if they're in assisted living or independent living for that, right, independent living, we have grocery delivery. We want, we have the ability for them to look up whatever recipe they want so they can make these on their own if they want to make any type of dish that we've served. So enabling, technology as an enabler for independence is really key to what we're focused on as well.
I really love that, because what you're really talking about is enabling the same things that you and I are doing as we live our lives day to day, right? But in this in the context of senior living. So I want to touch on two things. We're almost out of time here, but the first thing I want to do is I want to just take a pause and remind everybody that we have got the Foresight AI Lab that's coming up in January in Las Vegas. We would love to have you there. You can use the code INSIDER, all caps, to get a 10% discount. We would love to have you there. Restaura is going to be talking about how they're using AI. They're doing a presentation on in dining services, and it'll be that kind of presentation where if you're using Restaura, you can do it. If you're not using Restaura, you're going to learn things about how you can use AI in your dining organizations better. And so we do hope you're there. It'll be an amazing event. You'll have a playbook. You're not going to just get high-level ideas that you still got to go back and figure it out. People are going to talk about what they figured out, and so it's super. The last thing I want to talk about, though, is you're doing something very unique with your employees. There are a few companies outside senior living that are doing this, but I don't think anybody in the whole senior living ecosystem is doing this. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. And this is super exciting, right?
It is.
Yeah, and we've had more inquiries and buzz and excitement about people wanting to join Restaura, right, because of this model. So we've been working very closely with a company out of New York called Ownership Works. They are a leader in employee-owned models. To create a program that rewards every single team member here for their contribution to a shared success, right? So, in fact, over 35% of the company is employee-owned, Steve. So we've taken 35% of the company and made it employee-owned. It's unheard of in the industry. It's unheard of in most industries.
Yeah.
Employee turnover is a major issue for senior living operators, right? 71% of the community leaders we surveyed viewed staffing shortages kind of as a top issue impacting their business, right? And you've probably heard this and seen it.
Yeah.
We are bullish that our employee ownership model will empower the team to exceed expectations for residents and really improve the culture for the entire senior living community. When you're an owner in a company, you want to succeed, you want to do better, you want to come to work. You're not going to call out on a shift, right? This model is absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful model. I'm familiar with that. I was at a presentation where one of the leaders for Ownership Works talked, and he told this amazing story about a company. I think it was a garage door manufacturing company where when it was sold, frontline employees were getting checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's a very unusual. I'm not promising that you're going to necessarily get $100,000 if you're a food server in a restaurant, but it's an opportunity to really to do something that's life-changing for people and their families. And it becomes meaningful if you're a senior living operator and you're using those services. So I just, I bow down that you're willing to, that your ownership has been willing to give up that big a chunk of the company to take care of team members. It's really remarkable. So
it is certainly a game changer in this industry, Steve. And we've heard from many people about this. It's a differentiator.
Well, David, we are past time. This has been a great conversation. People should be checking out what they're doing. I expect radical changes for the better in dining services because of the impact you're having. Already talking to operators who are looking at what you're doing and just completely intrigued by it. I love your passion for both the dining services for residents and for the technology that makes everything better. And I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, all of you. And just one final note, we will be dark for Foresight TV on Friday so that we can give the entire team the day off. So David, thank you very much. If you would stay on for just a few minutes afterwards. And with that, I wish you a great holiday.
Thank you.